Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift.
Popstars.
Pop superstar Ariana Grande.
Ariana Grande.
Thank you, Ariana.
Celebrities.
Justin Bieber.
How do they capture and maintain your attention over so many years? What psychological techniques and branding do they use to keep you hooked and drawn into their universe? So I was with a friend. She started singing Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift. As someone who's interested in psychology, marketing, it got me thinking, why and how does that song particularly stay in my head? You know, out of all songs in the world, why is it that song? Is it just a expertly crafted pop tune, or are there other psychological influences going on in my subconscious that I'm not aware of? And how, out of all artists, can they maintain a loyal fan base over so many years? And look, I appreciate there are plenty of people who don't even like pop music, and there are even some people that don't even particularly listen to music. Yeah, they exist, apparently. But even for them, they have surely heard of Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Eminem. So to answer the questions above, I'm going to be going through what I think I've cleverly crafted as the 5-step pop star phenomenon process. Let's start with the first stage of catching and hooking your attention. Now, it's obvious that us humans love music, and it is, of course, these huge pop stars and artists' bread and butter product, business product. And the music industry is, quite competitive. According to the UK Office for National Statistics 2020 Annual Population Survey, around 45,200 people living in the UK state their occupation as musician, whether that's full, part-time, permanent or freelance. Nearly half, so 47%, earned less than 10,000 and only 9% reported earning more than 50,000 in 2019. So that means only 4,500 people earned 50,000 or more from music alone. Now, I know that data's from 2019, so it could be slightly outdated, but I wouldn't be surprised if it shifted too much in the past 4 or 5 years. So yeah, it's competitive to say the least. What's one way to stand out in such a competitive market? Worms, specifically earworms. So I wanted to research into how earworms exist and why a song can get stuck in your head for potentially days, weeks, even months on end. So I came across a study called Dissecting an Earworm, and it basically covered whether a song popularity might help to explain why earworms exist and why they continuously repeat in our mind. So the research paper is quite long, to be honest, so I didn't want to go through all of it, but I pulled out some interesting points. The study essentially said that the question is quite difficult because the likelihood of a tune becoming an earworm is dependent on such a wide range of factors, which are both intramusical as well as extramusical. So intramusical, the lyrics of a song, the tune, the melody, and the extra-lyrical radio play, previous past associations, and the individual cognitive ability of a song, which I also found quite interesting, basically meaning how easy it is for your brain to retrieve that song. An analysis of the UK charts shows that songs that achieve higher position and longer runs may be played more on radio and other streaming sites, thereby increasing the familiarity. And when it comes to the technical terms, there's a lot of terminology which, again, I didn't particularly understand, to be honest. Earworms were generally reported to contain notes with longer durations and smaller pitch intervals, which might make the song apparently easier to retrieve and sing along to. So essentially, artists and producers would, of course, love their song to become a worldwide earworm so that their brand can be constantly replaying in your mind in filler moments. And that, to be honest, is a very powerful marketing and branding technique. And if you're curious, the top rated earworm reported in the study was Bad Romance by Lady Gaga, because, well, I mean, it's a banger, but also it is unbelievably catchy. So apologies if I've now got that stuck in your head. And that leads me on to the next section, mass media, repetition, and the mere exposure effect. So let's say you're an artist and you want to stand out, and you spent countless days, weeks, months crafting a potential earworm. How do you actually get people to listen to it? Cue mass media. I think we've naturally become so accustomed to radio, streaming sites, social media that we forget just how instrumental these mediums have been in the distribution power of artists and being able to get their music played by so many people. And this can potentially scale up to a global scale. It doesn't even have to be that big. It can be even national or just a regional level. I mean, that run in the 2010s of the YouTube era saw some artists racking up hundreds of millions, even billions of streams. I mean, think just 20, 30 years ago, this would have been unheard of. So throw probably quite a lot of money and sponsorships behind radio play and streaming sites. And of course, with an ounce of luck, you'll get enough people listening and re-listening for them to experience what is known as the mere exposure effect. And the mere exposure effect is our tendency to develop preferences for things simply because we are familiar with them. In the same research paper, the authors stated recent exposure to a tune is generally the most frequently reported trigger of an earworm experience. So it basically acts as a domino effect. I mean, you hear the tune for the first time, which is already inherently designed to be very catchy, and the more you hear it, the further it gets repeated and played in your mind. Other researchers in the study reported unfamiliar songs were more likely to become earworms if the participants heard the songs 6 rather than just 2 times, which will be in large part due to the familiarity principle and mere exposure effect. And I guess that makes sense from a layperson's point of view. You could say that humans are generally drawn to comfort, familiarity. So if we've already heard a particular song or artist that we like, it makes sense that we're more likely to want to go back to that same song or artist. But if you want a more holistic and long-standing music career, you can probably get pretty far actually with consistently producing very repetitive and catchy earworms. But to actually strengthen a brand in your listeners' and consumers' minds, you'll probably need something more. And that leads me on to section 3, strengthening the brand, fostering the emotional connection in your mind through authenticity and vulnerability. So how do you actually create emotional vulnerability? I can almost guarantee that almost all major global artists have reached the heights that they have and grown the huge fan bases through being able to be open and vulnerable and authentic with their audiences. So when fans naturally listen and consume their music, their media, it triggers the deep psychological connections, even if we don't consciously realize. And I think this is something that Miss Swift has nailed. She has the pop earworms like Shake It Off and Cruel Summer, but also has deeply emotionally moving songs like All Too Well, Dear John, and well, you can take your pick from the rest. But this vulnerability sort of transcends her music into her public persona, which also emphasizes vulnerability and having the courage to open up about anxieties, insecurities, public scrutiny, and the pressures of fame.
You know, you have this little voice sort of inside of you saying sort of negative thoughts.
You can't do it. You're a loser.
Is that what the voice says?
Yep.
But of course, Taylor Swift isn't the only artist that does this. It makes sense, you know, being vulnerable and authentic with friends and family naturally leads to the strengthening of your bonds. But interestingly, this same emotional exchange can happen with an artist whilst hearing a song or watching a music video, even if you cognitively know that artist has no idea who you are and they're just a person behind a screen. And of course, music is a way for so many people to safely process their emotions. So when a brand or an artist helps you do that process repeatedly, it's no wonder they become so reinforced in your mind as a consumer, because you feel like you are actually sharing and exchanging that emotional connection with the artist. And that leads me on to another technique that so many artists, particularly, sorry to bring her back up again, Taylor Swift, does, which further engages her audiences and fan bases even more, is storytelling. Now, us humans, we love a good story, and there's been plenty of research into why storytelling is so beloved by us humans, and there's a lot of research out there, but one of the most popular and prominent books and studies is The Storytelling Animal by Jonathan Gottschall. Now, disclaimer, I haven't actually read the book yet. It is definitely on my reading list, but I have taken some highlights which potentially interested me and that are related to what we're discussing and storytelling. So in the book, Jonathan presents a few reasons why stories could be so loved by humans. One suggests that it could just be a mere side effect of evolution. So in essence, for whatever reason, our brains naturally are inclined to pick up on stories, maybe because of patterns in the environment which helped us survive in hunter-gatherer societies. Others view stories through an evolutionary lens, and he stated that stories are almost always about people or personified people or animals with problems, mostly around universal human themes of love, insecurity, fear, meaning, power, influence, status, all of these universal human emotions. Also quoted in the book is Jeanette Burroway, who states that literature offers feelings for which we don't have to pay. It allows us to love, condemn, condone, hope, dread, and hate without any of the risks ordinarily involved. And yeah, that makes sense. Stories are not about going to the bathroom, driving to work, eating lunch, having the flu, or making coffee, unless those activities are linked back to the point and meaning of a universal theme. So in addition to the authenticity and vulnerability that a lot of artists have the courage to share on a potentially global stage, complementing and additionally adding storytelling just further strengthens the bonds that their brand has with their consumers. So you experience their complicated heartbreaks, their deepest fears and insecurities, their desires of love, making millions, being in the high echelons of society, all without having to pay the actual emotional price of going through those emotions, all from the comfort of your sofa, your desk, just being at home. And it's crazy how all this happens subconsciously. That leads me to the final step in my 5-step Popstar phenomenon process: continuous maintenance of the subconscious brand using social media and parasocial relationships. So the final step is actually reinforcing and maintaining their brand in your subconscious mind. Because even when you've spent all the time to build and maintain your loyal fan base and consistently put out catchy pop tunes that your fans and audiences love, you actually need to maintain it for many years in the future to come if you want a long-standing career in music. And that's where this little tool can come in handy. So with the advent of social media, pop stars can not just use these platforms to simply promote, but actually genuinely build and maintain connections with their fans directly. And this of course relates back to the authenticity point, because artists can then share personal moments, directly message and interact with fans, post behind the scenes content that makes them appear more relatable, more down to earth, and basically like a real person behind all the success and fame. And this has sparked another recent phenomenon in the past few years, or past decade or so now, and that is parasocial relationships. So if you're involved in the online space at all, you've probably heard of parasocial relationships. And essentially they're one-sided, where fans feel a deep connection with a public figure despite having no real life interaction, similar to what I was saying earlier. I mean, at a glance, this seems rather counterintuitive why we'd want a connection with someone who we have no actual real life interaction to and who can't reciprocate our emotions. This source has summed it up really well. I'll also link it down below. It states that parasocial relationships expand the social network in a way that negates the chance of rejection and empowers individuals to model and identify with individuals of their choosing who naturally elicit an empathic response. Furthermore, viewers experience a connection with the media user and express feelings of gratitude, affection, longing, encouragement, and loyalty towards them. Over time, so many experiences are shared with John Daly or Justin Bieber or Jay-Z that we develop an intimacy and friendship with the media user and feel that they know and understand us. And yeah, that makes sense. I mean, how informally and freely do we talk about celebrities and pop stars and people in the public eye like we personally know them? And like this article has shown, we kind of do know them to a certain extent because artists essentially sacrifice their personal lives and privacy to be so open about their experiences.
Some dark shit out there, man. So we just have to be there for each other as much as we can, because you never fucking know.
And couple that with very emotionally charged and very cleverly crafted music, it's no wonder that unbelievable parasocial bonds are created between them and their fans, and why their brands can be sustained for so long in most people's minds. I also thought when researching this, it helps that so many huge pop stars and celebrities that we know and are so accustomed to today also grew up with us. I mean, think of the likes of Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber, and plenty of actors like Emma Watson, Leonardo DiCaprio. Many of us saw their transition from being in the spotlight from such a young age and seeing them grow into adulthood. And it just reinforces the idea that we personally know them. I mean, growing up for me, I probably had plenty of parasocial relationships with YouTubers. And I mean, one person that I loved was Ariana Grande in particular, when I saw her on Victorious and seeing her transition over to mainstream. For whatever reason, I resonated with her a lot, but I'm sure there were plenty of others. I mean, I was dedicated. I knew all of the quiz up questions and answers, if anyone remembers. I mean, that game was huge back in the day. I was obsessed. So anyway, the point is the lengths that we will go to, especially the impressionable teenage mind will go to uphold their favorite artists and actors' brands is insane. And the parasocial bond that they have with their artist is also insane, and just goes to show just how effective and strong these artist brands can become in people's minds. And that, in my opinion, is the key for the longevity of a music career, because whilst I think you can definitely get pretty far with consistently producing chart-topping, catchy earworms, to sustain that attention and bond in the long term is ultimately rooted in authenticity, vulnerability, and creating almost unbreakable parasocial bonds with your fans and with your audience. So now that I've covered my Popstar phenomenon process for brand longevity, how does this apply to you, dear viewer? I think whether we recognize it or not, we all have a personal brand that we carry with us to cultivate and sustain your own personal brand with employers, potential business ventures you might want to launch, or just with family and friends and your network in general. We should take note and aim to be authentic, share our vulnerabilities, include storytelling, and share our insecurities as well as our joys and successes. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're interested in broader psychology, branding, and marketing related videos, please make sure to subscribe to the channel below. Thank you and ciao.